start the meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:01. And everyone is present except for Lisa Thompson and Mike McConnell. And first up will be the approval of minutes. And we're going to review the minutes of June 14th, 2014. The members present for that meeting were Kim Hopewell, Pat Crowley, Lisa Thompson, and Ron Menard. So the only ones that can approve it are myself, Pat Crowley, and Ron Menard. Are there any questions on that meeting?
I'll make a motion that we approve those minutes, even though I wrote them, if that's what you're waiting for.
Yes. Yes. Pat, do you have any questions on the minutes?
I don't. I'll second the motion.
Okay. Approved as written. And all those in favor say aye.
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 And ayes
I
have it.
abstain.
Okay. June 14th, disabilities minutes are approved. Okay, old business, we're going to follow up on acceptance of the selectmen's meeting vote for the Disabilities Commission account. It's defined under Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 22G, regarding the handicap parking violations. I spoke with the town administrator, Jim Brissell, regarding placing an article on the town meeting warrant in October to fund this account from unexpended balances of fiscal year 2022 in the amount of $1,000 to start us off. Pat, can you give us an update on the type of account that the select board is voting on?
No, because Jim owes me an answer. I know you, I read the document that you had provided, and it said that this is the select board. All that has to happen is we have to vote. Jim is looking into it. He believes that we have to go to town meeting to have town meeting approve everything. And it's not just the select board vote. So I just said to him, hey, I wasn't involved. The conversation that was relayed to me from Kim was that no, the select board votes on it, not the town. So he's looking into that. He has not gotten back to me. So as of right now, it's in his hands, and he will let us know whether we actually have to go and have the town adopt everything, create the revolving fund, and then we're good to go, or if it's just something that can be done at the select board level.
Okay. All right. I know he's putting a place on the town meeting warrant for that to fund it. So we can clarify that before town meeting too.
I anticipate he'll have an answer at our next meeting. I think it's the 17th.
Okay.
I think he'll probably have something for me then.
Yeah, because I originally asked him for $400, and he said, no, I wouldn't do anything under 1,000. I said, oh, okay, I can take that.
We'll take it.
Yeah. Okay. And as a reminder, we had voted Ron as treasurer for that, and he's got signed the papers, and he gave them to Leslie. So that's all set for that. And for a town meeting, the letter was sent for the town administrator on June 21st to place the holder for the bylaw. And the Disability Commission was submitted to the town administrator for the warrant for acceptance into the general bylaws. So we still have to hold a public hearing for that. And we need to do that and follow the public hearing criteria as defined under our general bylaws under Article 23 of the public hearing notice. So that falls under Section E that promulgates and eliminates or alters or modifies any local rule or regulation, and in instances which affects the rights of citizens of West Boylstons to lawfully enjoy, use, or enjoy their private property and or to operate lawful businesses within the town of West Boylston, and where the authority to promulgate such rules or regulations is vested in local authority without first holding a public hearing. Notice of such hearing is to be published to the town websites on local WBPA TV to at least 14 calendar days prior to the public hearing. So this will fall modification to the general bylaws will fall into the category, therefore we must hold a public hearing at least 14 days prior to the meeting date. So as long as we hold this before town meeting and discuss the bylaws, then we should be all set to have that taken care of. The
Do that, or is the
bylaws were already given to the town administrator, that were given to the bylaws committee. So we're all set on everything that we needed to follow. And as long as we hold that public hearing, we should be all set.
Kim?
So, okay, moving on.
Kim.
Since Mike McConville has not been to any of our meetings for a while, and he's the scribe, I've discussed with the co-chair and the vice chair on voting on having a new scribe. So with his absence, I'd like to discuss having new nominations come. So what do you think about that, Pat?
Back to what you were saying before, do we have to hold the public hearing, or does the bylaws committee hold the public hearing?
We do. We do.
Okay. You're the ex-town clerk. You know better than me. I just thought that would be the
Yeah.
bylaws committee that would
Yeah,
do it.
I've spoken to the bylaws committee and they said, nope, that's
Okay.
you. So all we have to do, I guess, is to sit and open up the meeting and say, we're having, we want to bring forth a new bylaw. We're the Disabilities Commission. This is the bylaw that is a boilerplate of the, for the Disabilities Commission. We want to put it into the general bylaws. This discusses the roles of the bylaw committee, commission, excuse me. And it discusses the structure of the bylaws commission, the definition of how the, what the roles are, how it's formed, you know, how the offices are. And you basically read what the commission does, how MAUD is set up and so forth, answer any questions of anybody that comes to the meeting. And then the meeting is adjourned, and that's it. And once that is done, then you've set the requirements that's done by law, and then you have the bylaws committee on town meeting night, since they don't have a special committee meeting for this, you know, because they meet town meeting night. I mean, they can certainly come to the public hearing if they wish. I've opened up for them to come to any of our meetings, and so far nobody has made a desire to come. So when we set a date for the public hearing, I'll open it up again, say, hey, you know, we're having the public hearing this night. If you want to come to it, please come if you have any questions. But since this is a standard boilerplate bylaw and there's nothing in it that's controversial or anything, you know, it's probably not something that they're going to question. And I don't think that there's anything in it that they're going to say no. And on town meeting night, there's nothing that's controversial on it that they wouldn't want in there anyway. So it's pretty easy. So all we have to do is set up a meeting date. Now, October 17th is town meeting. So, you know, the beginning of October is fine to have that public hearing. So all we have to do is set up a meeting date for that. So is there any more questions on that before we go voting for the scribe? No?
Because it has to be an actual public hearing where people are in attendance, or can it be done via a Zoom meeting?
No, there should be people in attendance.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to give people the opportunity to come and okay. So are we all in favor of voting on a new scribe?
Not me.
Not you?
I said, as long as
You
it's not
You
me.
don't want to be a scribe?
Oh, heck no.
Okay, well, the only one that's left would be Lisa. She's not here. Can we vote on her in absence?
Well, why not?
We have a motion to vote, motion to.
I'll make a motion to nominate Lisa Thompson for the clerk position.
Okay, do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Second, Pat, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, you can't, you made the first. Okay, so Marcia made motion, Pat second, all in favor, aye. So Lisa is the new scribe.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so moving on. Okay, so now the Edward J. Collins Junior Center for Public Management, progress on the self-evaluation plan. Let's see, the center, just to update, we have a person listening here. The center is dedicated to improving the efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability at all levels of government, and as a particular focus of local and state government. Michael Edwards has been with us on numerous occasions and has graciously given up his time to update us on occasion regarding self-evaluation plan for the town. Mike, at this time, I'll turn over to you for the update on the self-evaluation plan.
Thanks, Kim. It's good to be back. I do apologize again. It's taken us a little bit longer. We've had some issues trying to collect data and, just natural staffing issues that I think everybody is experiencing right now, but we're basically caught up. We've got all of the evaluation at this point completed. We still have a few of the individual report elements to write. But we've been on site, we've completed all the evaluation that we can do with the materials that we have. And we have enough of a draft at this point to present it to you guys to do an initial review. And then to really just talk about what we want to do for next steps, and in particular, how we want to go about developing the transition plan piece of it. That's kind of the checklist of these are all the things we're going to do to address all the things that we found when we were looking at everything across the town. And so what I wanted to do was just really give you an overview of how the report is laid out, where different pieces of information are, let you know a few of the pieces that are still outstanding, but that we'll plug in as we get. I'm waiting on some colleagues to just give me the last couple pieces to drop in. And then go over what I would recommend and suggest for a prioritization strategy, kind of how we want to go through things and how we want to involve you. When we originally conceived this, when I had talked with Nancy Lucier, the idea was that we would have this body basically develop all of the kind of priority action items, what we were going to do. Since then, we figured out everything that needs to be done. Now it's just you guys need to figure out how we want to make that checklist. I've got a couple of questions that when we get to that, I want to ask you about things that you may already have in the town that might help us get a big jump start on it. Project plans or capital plans that you may already have, but I'll ask those questions a little bit later. But for now, I just wanted to really go over the document, make sure you understood how it was laid out, and then turn it over to you. I guess, Kim, I transmit that to you and you can pass it, send it to everybody else.
Yes.
I keep everything directly in Word. I'm not using any PDFs, so I want to do that so that we've got something, one, that's accessible, but two, so that you guys can comment on it and get it back to me with your comments, because there's
Okay.
there are going to be a lot of pieces in there that need some review and need some correction because, in some cases we weren't able to really communicate a whole lot with the department heads and find out some specifics on operations. So we had to make some assumptions based on information we found. So if everybody's clear on that, I'll really just start by showing you kind of the table of contents and working through how we have this thing laid out, because as you can see, it's a big document. don't let that scare you. There's really only about 35 pages of transition plan. Everything else are the appendices and all the actual survey results and everything that we have going into the back end. So we like to start out with really just kind of an overview of the regulatory framework. What is the ADA? What are the different requirements we're working with? I would imagine by now you guys have gotten pretty familiar with everything that's out there. I know there's been a lot of trainings and seminars that you've attended. So you've got a pretty good idea about that. But what I like to do is kind of put that together and then lay out a guide to using the document so you have a good sense of where things are. And so I'll include that, and everything in here is hyperlinked so you can jump around. Anything in here that's referenced, you're able to easily click on it and it'll take you to the place in the document. But get back to where I was. Oops. So this front piece is a lot of the administrative requirements. So we start out with basically an overview of what we consider to be kind of the key elements that you need to be paying attention to. So, what is a program? It's basically absolutely everything that the town does. And so that's what we inventory. That's what we evaluate. The biggest piece of just about anything you guys do is the facilities. So that's kind of woven into how we're looking at programs. When we started this off, we talked with the departments, we did an inventory of their services, and then we really looked at the facility in the context of those services. Because what we really need to have is a plan that recognizes you're not going to be able to fix everything. There's just not enough money, and there's not enough time to address everything. So we really try to lean into what are the things that we can modify, and what are the program changes that we can make, whether it's offering something in a slightly different way, offering it in multiple ways, or even offering it in a different location. So really just try to approach it with the idea that you've got a very strong resource limitation. You can't do everything. So what are the must-dos? So we look at program accessibility in its entirety, which means basically everything doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to do the best we can when we view a program across all the different ways it's offered. What the ADA also required, you know this by now, is equally effective communication. In 1990, that didn't mean a whole lot other than documents themselves and telecommunications, assisted listening devices, things like that. Now it is almost exclusively website and electronic documents and how all those things work in communication. So we spend a good deal of time in here doing website analysis and looking at the way the documents are provided, how they're set up, and that's a big piece of not just what we audit, but what we look at for altering service delivery. You've got a lot of options to use technology to really overcome very costly building changes. So we talk about really the framework around the regulations in communication. Then we just do a run through of the standards that we're using. And really, there's a lot of best practice standards around website stuff, undeveloped or developed park spaces and public right-of-way. And then most importantly, there's the facility standards. And those are absolutely, they're absolute. They are objective, they're clear, they're official. There's no interpretation. And we did most of our facility analysis using the 2010 standards because of the information we had on when things were constructed and when they had been altered. I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that when we get into the next section, which are the limitations. While the intent here is to make things as accessible as possible, I think it's very important for a town to understand what are their limitations? What do they not have to do? And what can they lean on and help the public to understand where their obligation stops, because it's very, very easy for people to misinterpret what you're supposed to do, and what you have to do versus what they think you should do. So I spend a fair amount of time in here kind of going over things like safe harbor, exclusions and exceptions, and how you can use some of the tools that are laid out to not keep you from doing something, but give you a little bit of flexibility in how you respond to a need to make a facility alteration or address a request for accommodation. So I probably spend more time on that because I've been on the implementing side of this as a government ADA coordinator, and really had to explain to people why we couldn't do something, or why we weren't going to do something. So I really clear on what the limitations are to the obligation. So I spent a good amount of time talking about that. The administrative requirements, you don't have a whole lot of choice over these. So this is your public notice, which is an area that the town doesn't have currently up to compliance. The ADA coordinator, the designation of a responsible person. You have an ADA coordinator, but the notice of that ADA coordinator and the pieces of the operations that ADA coordinator is involved in might be an area for some improvement. So I go into a fair amount of detail over what that person should do and what some of the responsibilities that role should have, to let you guys think from an organizational perspective, you know, what is the role of our ADA coordinator and how much do we really want to put on his or her plate. The other piece is a grievance procedure. You actually have two, and I found both a Parks and Rec one and a townwide one from 2012 that are contradictory to each other. So that's something that's got to be addressed. And I lay out kind of what those, what an ideal policy would look like, and the, you know, recommendation to get that reconciled. These administrative requirements are things that really need to be knocked out in a very short period of time, you know, 30 to 60 days from, I recommend 30 days from when the plan is adopted. As we go through this draft, I have no doubt that you'll probably start working on some of these things just to make sure you've got a jump on it.
And that's under our purview?
Well, it's not specific over who does it. Ultimately, it's a policy. So I would assume that the select board has to adopt it.
Okay.
But they do have a grievance procedure out there. It's old, it's out of date, it doesn't have any of the right contact information, and it's missing some pieces. But I go through kind of all those pieces in there. This is how somebody makes a complaint, and how, more importantly, the steps that you guys go through to resolve that complaint. So one of the issues with the grievance procedure you have now is it doesn't contemplate the Disabilities Commission. You know, I think you guys are an important body. You should be an advisory body to the select board. And so you should have a role in how things ultimately are addressed, and how you work through issues, because that's where towns get in trouble, is in not properly following their grievance procedure or just simply not having one. So the other single bullet point in the administrative requirements is the self-evaluation and transition plan, which of course winds up being almost the entire document. And basically this is, we're going to look at everything, we're going to audit everything, we're going to tell you everything that's wrong, and then you're going to tell me how you want me to lay out a checklist for you to fix it. And then we'll go through some individual pieces of that self-evaluation as we kind of move our way down. So the way that I approach the self-evaluation is kind of, we break it up a little bit. There's a few different ways to gather the information on the programmatic side that give us different perspectives. So we started out, we did that public input survey. Really just to kind of make sure we weren't missing anything, but also public input's a required part of the transition plan. So we're actually doing it almost double what we should, because we'll have another public input opportunity when this whole thing gets wrapped up, because will offer the final plan out for public comment before the select board fully adopts it. But in addition to that public input process that we started that kind of sets the stage, we distributed questionnaires out to all the departments, had a little bit of back and forth to get them filled out, still have a few pieces that weren't filled out that we're going back with interviews just to make sure we have a full understanding. But that then gave us the information to go in and audit all the facilities. And so we've gone in over a series of trips up there and measured every toilet lid. We have absolutely measured, the angles on every ramp. We don't touch right of way outside of the direct access to a facility from the right of way because one, it was outside the scope, but two, that's a big task to survey all the right of way and all the sidewalk. We do look at is right of way from a programmatic standpoint, and do we have the right processes to inspect sidewalks, to maintain them, more importantly, especially in a town that's got any kind of construction going on the private sector, how are we inspecting private built sidewalks that are then turned over to public right of way when a development is built, for example. So those are the things that we look at when we look at right of way. But the facility evaluations, like I said, we've completed them. We're still got a few of the reports that we've got to finish up, but those are at the very end of the report. They're photo captured, an example of one, so you can kind of understand how to navigate through them. But we use that to get an understanding of, how are we using the buildings and what kind of questions do we need to ask with the programmatic side of it. So this first piece is kind of grouped by building. So we look at in town hall, for example, we're looking at those town hall departments that use that facility as their primary base of operations. We have some general things that seem to apply to everybody. How are we maintaining our facilities across the board? How are we handling customer service and requests for accommodations? So those are dealt with in this overview and general townwide findings. That's kind of a generic catch-all for things that everybody does rather than just repeating them over and over again with every department. Then we looked at the specific departments, starting with the town hall departments, and went through them one by one. After giving a summary of the big issues in their building that might be impacting accessibility, rather than repeating every single grab bar and toilet paper holder at that point, just gave kind of a one paragraph summary of, this is what's wrong with town hall. These are the major problems you have at town hall. These are, there's some minor things that you'll want to fix, but basically this is your big ticket piece on town hall. And here are the departments operating in town hall, and here are the specific things we saw with their policies and their procedures that could be a barrier. And most of those wound up being related to website usage and publication of forms, how they handle forms on their website. It's difficult, but they're also kind of low-hanging fruit pieces where, we get some good trainings in place, we get a good periodic inspection process, and those things kind of go away. Interestingly, well, not interestingly at all, and not surprising, but in the public survey, documents and website actually came out as very high priority issues. Those were the things that people had the most issues with, outside of some very specific facility issues. By and large, across the board, there were a lot of comments and a lot of responses around website accessibility and documents in particular. So then we go through the departments that are solo in their facility, like the library. And in that case, we're dealing with just the library building, a summary of that. And then we've got a summary of the findings from a policy standpoint and the findings or the recommendations to address them. And all things considered, across the board, the departments are doing a very good job with the facilities that they have, with the exception of some of those document posting issues and some website issues that are pretty common across all departments. We didn't find much in terms of any real programmatic barriers in the departments. They, for the most part, centered around facility issues and technology issues. So that was good. So this is the list of the different departments. We kind of grouped the school department together because we only did a building review for them. We did not do any programmatic review. That was not part of the scope of what Nancy had asked us to do. So we just concentrated on their buildings. And then we looked at the outdoor facilities and kind of lumped them together. Pride Park was not included in this because that assessment had been done previously. And I've got it. Also, we'll probably, if I can get permission from the author, we'll append it to ours. But the town's already in receipt of that, and it was perfect. So I wouldn't do anything with that anyway.
What'd you think about the DPW building? That would have been the.
Oh, it's an absolute disaster. But this kind of goes back to our perspective in looking at this. You're not going to fix it. There's no way to make it accessible without basically tearing it down. So we look at what are our programmatic alternatives there. The DPW, for example, they offer almost every service they have online. The only thing that they've got is they've got 1 or 2 permits that you might have to turn in by hand, but they'll come down and meet you curbside. Right. Those are reasonable modifications and reasonable accommodations that they can make. When we're viewing the program in its entirety, I find those perfectly acceptable. Right. I'm not going to be the guy telling you to fix that building because there's no fixing it.
Right.
Are things like the DPW building then
there's no fixing that.
Like accepted from any rules and regulations because it's a 100-year-old building that's fallen down type thing?
Well, it's clearly in violation of just
everything.
Well, we didn't evaluate it from like a building code and life safety standpoint. We evaluated it from accessibility code. So in that regard, almost everything is inaccessible, but it's not open to the public theoretically, or it could be closed to the public if services that face the public were provided in another way. For example, they really don't ever bring anybody into that building. If they have to, they can meet them somewhere else. They can meet them at, if they need to have a meeting with contractors and they have notice and they need an accommodation, they can book a meeting room at one of the other locations. Everything they do, they don't even take payments there. They have the ability to take things online. Most of their payments can be taken at the tax collector office. They have a few forms that need to be updated and made more accessible. And they've got some notices to post to basically say, you can't come here. We'll provide our service remotely. We'll provide our service virtually, but DPW is one of those departments that they have, depending on the structure, the organizational structure, they have very little forward-facing, public-facing activity. I mean, they are a line department. They're in the field. ADA does not apply to employee-only areas, with some exception as far as some shared circulation space, but they're exempt. So are there building code violations on that building? Oh, I'm sure. Are we going to include them in this report? Absolutely not. I mean, we basically looked at the building, said there's no way to make this particular building accessible other than potentially parking. If we were going to maintain the curbside service, there's some things that can be done on the exterior. And then it really does need to have the accessible route from the right-of-way looked at. But I would put all those as pretty low priority things. The services can be offered elsewhere, and you've got higher impact projects to do in other places. So we take that approach with a few of the facilities, fire being one of them. Fire's got some pretty good accessibility issues there. But again, there's not much offered in terms of public interaction at that facility that has to be offered at that facility. Burn permits are online. The only thing I wasn't clear on, and I've got to check with the chief, is how they do their fire inspection, how they actually receive the the smoke detector inspection payment. So that we kind of went into that level of detail. just to see if that's actually something that they need any accessible elements on site for. But if something's not open to the public and it's not a public facility being used for public services where the public is coming in, we can rely on some exemptions and not fix things. And let's go after the high, the high impact stuff like the library, like access to the town hall parking area and the accessible route into town hall. Those are areas where you need to concentrate your efforts, not DPW, not fire. That's my perspective, but that's kind of covered in that limitations to your obligation section. So you get an idea of what you don't have to do. So we go over all of those individual facilities, and then we spend a pretty good amount of time talking about communications. ADA provides a lot of legislated guidance on things that aren't used anymore. There's a lot of information on TTY and TDD, and those are still used occasionally, but the technology has changed so much since the ADA was written and since all the guidance in CFR was published, that a lot of those things are that they give you very specific guidance on are just simply out of date. What they don't give you very specific guidance on are things like website and accessible documents and public meetings, for example, and things like that. So what they do say is, in the absence of an actual official guidance, you need to use the next best thing, find a best practice. So there are some universally accepted best practices around website. WCAG 2.0 is level 2 or level 2A is kind of the standard that we audit around. And basically we go through your website and we're checking contrast on font versus background. We're checking links. We're making sure pictures have alternative text, and doing things like eliminating abbreviations and acronyms that screen readers just don't pick up well and don't translate well into screen readers.
What do you call that again?
Call what?
What did you say that?
The standard, it's called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.0, and we look at level AA, 2A.
Level what?
Level AA. It's all in the report as far as which standard we audit with. We also don't use it for certain pieces because, again, it gets into an enormous amount of really technical detail. You guys aren't your own webmaster. I mean, you're using an outside vendor to provide the web service. So quite frankly, you're stuck with what you got. You can change colors. When you load pictures up to it, you can put alt text on a picture, the documents that you post to it. Those are the things you have control with, but you don't have an enormous amount of control over a lot of the underlying infrastructure on your website. Now, West Boylston Light Plant's a little bit different. They've got a different vendor for theirs, so they've actually got an excellent accessibility section on their website. Much better, I think, than what the town has, but what the town has is largely good and compliant. There's just some little things that the users need to do better when they put stuff on the web.
Yeah, when we picked out the website and we got to pick out the background color, the size of the font. There was quite a few different ones that we worked with the developer to do so that we were compliant. Yeah,
well, they have some tools called contrast checkers, where they'll look at elements of the site and determine whether or not it meets a certain level of contrast. That's a big thing that visually impaired people struggle with, is contrast. So for example, your main landing page, that splash across the top with that light green and white, that doesn't meet the contrast guidelines. There's not enough contrast
because
in it.
When we hired this, when we went with this company, it was supposed to be fine. We paid a lot of money for that.
Well, those are minor things that can be adjusted. And again, it depends what, you've got a lot of things to fix before you worry about your font choice on
Right.
your logo.
Oh, I
on-
know,
Yeah,
but
so-
you know, seriously, we did look into a lot of that
When was that?
Oh, how many years ago did we hire Karen? Do you remember, Marcia? When Karen first started, when we went to that that was back in Mixter, for God's sakes. When
I
we
was-
Yeah,
went-
that was in Mixter,
It
so
was a
that was
long
like,
time ago.
Oh, yeah, it was quite a while.
yeah, that had to be like 2008, maybe.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
all right, so this has been kind of the funny thing with the web stuff is we didn't start seeing good standards come out until probably about 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So this is not, they didn't do anything wrong.
It was when.
The
well, we had-
guidance was not there. There simply wasn't guidance. I mean, to give you an example on right-of-way, for example, in 2011, the Access Board released right-of-way guidance, proposed right-of-way guidance. It still has not been adopted. It's been in a comment phase for 7 years.
Yeah, but
Wow.
we followed the compliance with the guidelines in order to do that, because we went through lots of colored choices, fonts, and a lot of things to follow. Because we made sure that we were doing it right at that time.
Well, the underlying structure of the website is good. It's easy to navigate. All the different elements are well placed, and how you work through it works very well. And that's, but again, the standards have evolved. And, you know, as they've started to identify what specifically about a website creates issues for screen readers, for different optical reading technologies, and for people that are just visually impaired, that might be using magnifiers or even screen shaders to remove glare.
Right.
But when we get kind of to the end of this, I'll show you some examples on the website audit, so you kind of understand a little bit about you know, how we go about it, and then also everything's linked to what the source is, so you can look at what those, you know, what is a contrast checker? How do you use a contrast checker, for example? And then, you know, when I was going through the individual departments, I was using a screen reader. I was checking, you know, I download a document, look at it. Some, you know, 90% of them were fine within what they were, which was, you know, readable and printable documents that you then have to fill out by hand. But the screen readers picked them up. So they were PDF'd correctly. They were put up there correctly. They're just older style forms that need to be updated. But did that for every single department, pulled their minutes for all the boards, pulled the agendas. 90% of them, yeah, pretty good. Okay. But some weren't. So standards have changed, and we spent a lot of time kind of going through what needs to happen on the website, because ultimately those are going to be your low-hanging fruit items for fixing things. It's how do you let people avoid coming into a facility that has accessibility issues to give you time to fix it? And then how do you provide things in alternative formats for people that either aren't going to come, or because of a visual or hearing impairment can't use something? So huge.
So do we let these people know that, do we write them a letter and say that this form needs to be fixed, fix it, and then put it back up?
Who, the website people?
No, do we as the Disabilities Commission say you need to fix this form and put it back up?
Are you referring to the departments?
Yeah, do we as a Disabilities Commission call the
I would-
department and say you need to fix this?
I would think not. I would ask Pat what his thoughts are, but my experience on this and the way that these bodies typically work is that ultimately you are developing a document that the select board will, you know, approve with amendments, deny, whatever. If they approve it and it's their plan, they're directing the departments to do it at that point.
That's what I was going to say. You know, it's our plan. If the select board or the town administrator have questions or concerns, they can come back to the Disability Commission for our opinion on things. But ultimately, it would necessarily have to be implemented by the select board and the town. Really, the town administrator's office at the direction of the select board is really who's going to be the implementing authority.
Yeah, I mean, the Disabilities Commission really doesn't have authority to direct a department to do anything. Select Board does, at least the way your charter's written. So,
Okay.
yeah, so this, and at this point, we're definitely not in the place where we're acting on anything in this report yet. This is when you guys get this draft, this is for you to sit back, read it, review it, tell me what I've missed, tell me what you disagree with. And then we address that stuff and start the prioritization process. But let me kind of get to that. We'll get to that transition plan piece, and then you guys can give me some guidance on what you think makes sense. But I'll get through this first. So also public meetings, before we get out of the communications piece. Some issues there, again, all for the most part technology based. And again, depending on where we have them, if we have facility issues in a meeting area, like we do with the light plant, then we need to just look for what are our alternatives to deliver the service in a different way. A lot of the fixes are going to be, one, they're going to be costly, but two, they're going to take a while. So where's the easiest way to get a path forward? I think this is really kind of interesting to look at what we learned during COVID, because everybody got really good at doing public meetings virtually. Nobody wants to go back. You get better participation, and the accessibility bonuses of doing hybrid or even fully remote are significantly more than they were in person. So, those are things you think about when you think, do we need to make a big investment in a meeting space where we have alternative ways to deliver that service that are equally effective? So that's the kind of communications piece. The public engagement, this is, like I said, it's 3 parts. One is the survey that we already did. And I'm embarrassed to say that the survey tool we use does not produce for us a document that is fully accessible. So we note that on there, we include it in the appendix, and then our narrative actually kind of provides narrative around it. You're not missing any information, but we are going to have one piece of our final document that's not going to be accessible. But we'll disclaim that. But the actual survey results are going to be included as an appendix on the very back. We do kind of an executive summary and pick out really the high priority stuff that we saw. Which facilities are giving people the most trouble, and where are people having the most issues? And it really is around a couple of facilities and website and communications issues. So no big surprise. I mean, town hall, library, light plant. Everybody kind of knows those. And then from a bigger picture perspective, parks. In particular, Pride and Good Ale. You've got some pretty significant issues there. But we go through that in the survey. And then just a little brief mention of the Disabilities Commission, because ultimately that's another avenue of public input. And one thing we'll want to do is, as we go through this, is kind of better define what the commission's role is. What kind of body is this going to be? And is there going to be interaction between this group and the ADA coordinator? Is that going to be a relationship that needs to be built? What is the role between the commission and the select board? Is it an advisory body, and how does all that work? So I would suggest that this document is a good place to kind of lay some of those things out, and leave it to you guys to tell me what to put in there. And of course the select board to approve it and say, yes, this is how we want it. And when we have a final version, then we jump into just another public comment. We push it out, we let it sit out there for 30 days, or however long you want. 30 days usually seems to be about when people lose interest. And then if there's any comments that we need to address, we make final edits and push it into the select board for final approval. So that kind of wraps up what the public engagement input looks like. We tend to go a little bit more robust in these reports than the minimum requirement, which is just have public comment. But that is also what seems to really fuel Massachusetts municipalities. So that's an important piece. We've got some recommended policy documents. One is a revised public notice. This is when we start the appendix, and we'll fill this out more with some other things after you guys do your review and say, what about this? What about this? We don't have this. There were things we just simply couldn't locate that we've got to ask, hey, do you have an equally effective communications plan? We couldn't find it. Nobody ever turned it into us, but somebody may know, oh, we've got this here. So we may add a few more policies just as samples that you guys can adopt and consider. And then we've got a really exhaustive resources section. That's just, it's descriptions and links of places you guys can go for information, for training, for online webinars. There's a section in there for different grants. So you can click on it and go to all the different grants that the state and the feds have around accessibility. It's just good information, but we like to have a good reference section in here so you can have it. And there is a piece that needs to get deleted. And then a full section of kind of training and technical assistance. So just links. Instead of having to go to 10 places to find all the links, we just try to put them in one little place so you've got it. And this is this document hopefully is a one-stop shop for information and resources. Next, we've got the actual, the transcribed versions of the departmental questionnaires. We used an accessible PDF. Ultimately, we got so many back after multiple attempts that were handwritten and scanned that we just ended up typing them ourselves. So we've now got all the department questionnaires here with questions about how they do alternative format requests, and really an inventory of their services so that we could make sure we're asking them the right questions. That's a pretty good chunk of the document. So that's why I said don't let the amount of pages scare you. Then there's the complete website audit, where we went through and audited the individual components of the website, and I'll show you that just so we can see it. And then there's the facility audits, and we've got a few of them, like I said, that are still in a draft form, but I think a little over 2/3 of them are 100% complete. The rest of them have been fully surveyed. We just haven't finished the reports, but we're working on them. And as we get them, and that's a question I guess I have for you, Kim. As we update this and fill in those pieces, can we send those to you one by one?
Yes.
And just send you a revised version? Does that create any kind of public document issue with
No,
having?
I can update, I can forward the update to the administrator
Okay.
and just have them rename.
Okay, then that's what we'll do is we'll just, as we get the individual facility reports finished, we'll send them to you. So, that way you're not waiting
Right,
until we get them all. We'll just kind of incrementally get it to you and then you
Right.
can.
we'll just check them and date them as you get them.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll give you a quick idea of what some of these individual departmental pieces look like. And we'll just look at, I'll show you one of these so you know. So the town hall department. So like I said, when you get down to this point, you're looking at a summary of the building, and then you're looking at individual things we found with each department that's in that building. And we're linking to the issues. We're putting the responses from their questionnaire if they provided any information that indicated a problem. And then where facility elements are specific to their activity, like for example, the drop box used by the building department, being outside of reach range, we'll note those specific. But if it's something larger with the building, we may not include it in the individual section. It'll be with the departmental or the actual building audit. I'll pull this up. I see people squinting. So yeah, that's what you have with these individual departments. We've got one for each. In some, when we get down to the ones that are outside of city hall or town hall, we've got both their facility summary as well as their programmatic issues. Of course, the library was a bad example. They really didn't have any programmatic issues. They do a bang up job on accessibility outside of their physical facility. But Municipal Light Plant has a number of things that we noticed. They were actually really good on the website piece. And didn't have some of the issues that some of the other town departments did, but they had a few other things that the other town departments didn't because of the way that they're set up. It was also interesting that they've got their own ADA coordinator. So one thing we do want to look at with them is whether they're legally required to have their own transition plan as a separate entity, but I think they can probably fold up under you if they're legally set up as a component unit. I don't know the answer to that. Pat, do you? How they're organized?
I believe there is a separate entity and we do their pay. We handle their payroll, but they're not,
They're also under our insurance.
they're under our insurance, but they're not.
MLP is a quasi-government agency, so they're their own everything. They have their own budget. They use us for bonding. And that's about it. Everything else that they do is essentially on their own. They have their own elected board that sets the rates and makes all the decisions for them.
Okay, I'm sure this has been dealt with somewhere before, but I'll just double check it. I don't see any reason that they can't essentially kind of participate in your transition plan and be covered under that. What I
What
don't
about
want,
the water department? Did you look at the water district?
totally
department?
separate entity that they're not part of you guys at all.
They use our insurance.
I
Yeah,
don't know that that is sufficient. I know that when we looked at the light plant, that Nancy wanted us specifically to look at their building and look at their website and those things. Did not want us to look at
It's
the
town land.
water
Town-
department.
Water
It's
department.
a
is
separate
like-
district, right?
Yeah, but they're town-owned property,
They're on town-owned property.
and so is the light plant.
Yeah.
We
So
can
that's why they're
look
in-
at it and see if they're required. If there's kind of two issues. One, do they have any public offices? And do they have any public
Yes.
spaces that people go into?
Yes.
So with the light plant, 100% they do.
Water district as well.
Let me look at that and we can come back to that and see if those offices need to be looked at. And if we need to look at any of their stuff, they're not really, I don't remember seeing anything on them on the website, really any kind of hooks and ties between the two. They were very distinct. But it was outside of what we looked at, but no reason it can't be added back in.
Okay.
So yeah, these are just what the individual departments look like. I mean, like I said, with Public Works, zero chance that you're getting them accessible, but they've got really good programmatic accommodations already being made, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. You fix what people are griping about, and that didn't seem to be one that's really triggering anybody
Right.
to make complaints, because they do a good job of offering the service in a different way.
Right.
So, a few little things with forms. One thing that you'll see is you've got some very new buildings that have some things that are very wrong with them. So that's something that, we need to look at how town buildings, when they're a town project, what is the inspection process? What is the plan review process? And how did we get things that were just that far off on a few of their buildings? Not much. There's a few things on the police building, but quite a few things on the outside of the senior center.
Can I make
few
a
things
comment
the inside.
on this? There's no accessible route to the Horseshoe Drive as required.
There is a,
I grew up on Horseshoe Drive, and that has never, it's always been a pathway for the
Yep.
kids.
yeah.
And so what is it?
So
What,
every building is required to have an accessible route to a site arrival point, any place a site touches a right of way. because there is that little piece of right of way, and I actually had to pull up the GIS and look at the property ownership right there. You've got right of way on Horseshoe Drive where it has that little turn in, and then you've
Right.
got the town property directly to it. It is required to have a accessible route between those two spaces. Whether you actually do anything with it and ever fix it, that's a town decision.
So it's still there. So how
Still
come it's-
there.
So why does that say there's no accessible route?
Well, there's no, it's not accessible. It's, I mean, boy, it's 14% grade and cross slopes anywhere from
Oh, okay, so
2% to
you know what it
10%.
needs to
It's
be
got to actually be a
At the grade.
legitimate accessible route.
Oh, okay.
No, that's, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood your question. And, you know, that's another one of those areas where,
Because it's still there.
yeah, it's got
Just
a,
slide down that.
yeah, it looked like a great place to ride a BMX bike.
It's
doing
fun.
that. But yeah, and that's one of the areas that it shows up on several buildings, and it's one of those things that the town is going to have to decide, how far do we go? Because you have that at the fire station, you have that at town hall, you have that at virtually every building that we surveyed. You have accessible route from the right-of-way issues. The
Okay.
senior center. So that route from, I forget the name of the road right there, but to the senior center up the driveway, it's not accessible. There's areas where the slope changes. Does anybody actually use that walkway?
Yeah,
That sidewalk?
we used to
Yes, they
walk
do.
from-
They do.
Yeah, we used to
Okay.
walk up that from Horseshoe Drive up to the,
Okay, so then that, something like that may be a priority, but then if you take, say, the back route, if it's never used and never an issue, how high up the priority does
I
it
don't-
go?
I don't think the seniors use it. I mean, my sister-in-law uses it to go up there to work, but I've never seen any of the other seniors and stuff go up there and use it. They all drive up. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's not that hard of a slope to walk up there.
If you're in a wheelchair, it's impossible.
Well, yeah, you're right, it is
So,
impossible. for a wheelchair.
And that's, that's where you guys have to kind of decide when you're prioritizing things, how close to the letter of the requirements is important, at what point, because truthfully, to connect that in an accessible route that meets ADA standards, that's a big project. You're talking switchbacks, railings, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
Is that a priority for the town?
no,
But then you do have other things that practically speaking aren't necessarily an issue, but they're absolutely a requirement under the ADA and under 521 CMR, and the senior center is a good
Well,
example. And
I
that's,
don't think 99% of the people there know that that's there.
well, you've got, so let's look at the senior center lot, for example, the ball fields right there. They're not used by the senior center. They're not really part of the programming offered at the senior center, but because it's the same site and it's the
Yeah.
same piece of property, you're supposed to have an accessible route between the building and those ball fields.
Yeah, well, the ball
So-
field is just a regular field right now. It's not a ball field. It's just grass right now.
No,
Yeah,
it's-
they're not
it-
using it.
Yeah.
It's a site element. And so
Yeah.
this is one of those areas where when you get into the letter of it, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that needs to be done, but
Yeah.
you guys have to decide how far are you going with these things.
Yeah.
So we go through a pretty good review with a summary of each building, and then kind of a look at their programmatic pieces for each department. And then we've got the actual facility reviews, and I'll show you what one of these looks like. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's one of the questionnaires. So we'll just look at facility audit. So these are what the facility audits look like. So we've got a description of the use. Those are just a few of my notes up on the front end, but we are looking at what the individual barriers are. So you'll have the barrier, and if it makes sense to kind of group all, several barriers together that are all in the same area.
Right.
In this case, for example, we've got site arrival issues at both sides of Town Hall, and these are pretty significant actually. But we've got cross slope issues, running slope issues. We're calling out what the code is that it's supposed to apply to, and then also what a corrective action might look like. This is actually probably the biggest and worst example at Town Hall, is that access from Worcester Street, and general site elements on the sidewalks and in the accessible parking. For example, at Town Hall, that's really your big issue there. Some minor things inside the building, but for the most part, it's the site. So a lot of little things, and then we've got a lot of low hanging fruit. So all of the accessible parking signs, they're mounted at the wrong height, pretty significantly off. Those are easy things that in-house crews can do. As a matter of fact, I think this is getting done by Kevin's guys as part of the ballot box project, when they're putting the new ballot box in at Town Hall, hopefully in the next couple weeks. But we just kind of go through everything. We're measuring every single slab, looking at all of the different slopes that we have on everything, and then giving a recommendation for improvements. But just lots of little things that could be easy to fix, like the drop box for the building inspector. It's way off on height. So when we get inside, we do look at some kind of maintenance things. Where are we keeping our brochures, for example, that people might have to reach? Those things need to be lowered. They've got to be within reach range. So we go through all of those. And then the next piece I wanted to show you while we're here is, go back to website audit. I want to show you what the website audit looks like. So just some narrative on the front end with some recommendations, and then kind of going through the whole thing. What are we missing? And here's those WCAG standards that you can
Oh,
click
those are
to.
the 1,800 pitches.
Yeah. But some things were done really well, and we try to point those things out as good examples also. But here's our color contrast issue. So we're only at 2.73 to 1, and the standard now is 4.5 to 1.
Yeah.
So, and we'll link you to a contrast checker so you can see how these things work and use them on your own sites. But that's what the website audit looks like. So next piece I want to show you is really the transition plan process, because this is where you guys need to figure out, where do we want to go. I don't think we have to answer right now, because I want you to take a chance to review the document and then give me some feedback on it.
Okay.
But we're basically at kind of this first step right here, where we've got the findings. Well, this should actually be none of those. Report. All right, so this is, so you guys are getting the draft of it right now. So this is just a cursory review, let you get comfortable with it. I'll get the rest of the little pieces in there so you've got it. Then we go back and we have a final draft that we then take and start developing a priority system. How do we want to prioritize what goes into the checklist, the short, medium, and long-term stuff that needs to get fixed? Because ultimately, that's what's going to keep, one, it's going to keep you on track for meeting accessibility targets, but two, it's going to keep you out of court. It's going to keep you from getting sued. Is having a plan and then following that plan and checking off the boxes. That's how projects, or that's how towns can avoid having the Department of Justice set up a camper out front. Because they do. The last thing you want is a consent decree from Department of Justice and Project Civic Access. So that next piece is kind of where you guys come in. And one of the questions I had is, it's always nice to be able to start with something that helps us figure out some priorities that are already there. So if there are strategic plans or master plans around Parks and Rec, or master plans around the library, does West Boylston have a capital improvement plan that's multi-year? Because if there's already schedules and dates and timelines for some of this work, we may as well use those as a framework to start.
Okay, that's a Pat Crowley question.
I couldn't find a CIP anywhere.
Yeah, there's a 5-year CIB plan. It's in an Excel website. It's fairly extensive.
Okay, good. Well, then that's I would recommend that being the place to start, is that you've already got this plan, you've already put thought into how things were prioritized. That's an easy way for us to knock out a lot of this stuff in terms of the physical projects that need to be done. I have to look and make sure everything is on there that's on here, but Pat, would you be able to tell me where that is or send that to me?
Yeah, I will send an email to you and Ray Burkalt. He's on the finance committee.
Okay.
I'll link the two of you up after this meeting and just ask him to send you a copy of it.
Perfect. Because that would be a great place to start. And then I can at least compare, what's on my list that's not on your list and what's on my list that is on your list.
If there's access specific things that need to be done, it's not on our list. I can tell you that.
But if you have a project at a facility and it wasn't about access, but it's working on that facility, and that facility also needs access improvements.
Right. Well,
that's when you need to make them.
Of course, yes. But I'm just saying, it hasn't been. It is not. I'll just let you see what Ray in the Capital Investment Board has developed. I was on that board before I joined the select board 7 years ago, so I know that they still keep that up.
Okay, well, good. It's somewhere to start. So that's a good thing to have. And really, when we do CIPs for communities, one of the first questions we'll always ask is, where's your transition plan? Because that's a great starting point for one. So it may as well work and vice versa also. Okay, so that's going to be kind of our next step, is how do we see this priority setting stage going? And I've got, what I think makes a lot of sense. I do think the administrative requirements, defining the role of the ADA coordinator, making the public notice, and reconciling the grievance procedure are things that need to happen pretty soon. I'm not saying you have to do them tomorrow, but if we figure we can wrap this whole thing up with getting everything prioritized in the next month, and hopefully get select board to approve it shortly thereafter, you want to be able to say within about 30 days of that, okay, we've got our role defined for our ADA coordinator. Here's our grievance procedure. Here's our public notice, and have all those finalized. But you can look at that stuff when you look at the draft. That's really the first thing that needs to be done, is hitting those. And then, it's off to the races, start fixing stuff.
Okay.
So that's the plan. I'm going to send Kim the draft. She can distribute it to you guys. And then as I get pieces of it completed, I will resend it to you, and then you can kind of keep reposting it. Anybody have any questions just on the draft or the structure? I know it's a lot of information.
Any other questions, guys? Okay,
No.
I have a couple of things that I'm going to follow up on, and then if you want to hang around for a couple of minutes, Mike. Okay.
Yeah, well, and I do have, I guess if we're done with the plan piece,
Yeah.
I did have one thing that I had sent you an email on, Kim, that Jim Purcell called me on earlier this week. Well, we talked about it earlier this week. And that is the ballot box that they wanted to place outside of Town Hall. Because he was interested in making sure it was accessible, I suggested we need to run this through the Disabilities Commission and make sure they like the recommendation. And so he asked me to share that with you guys and just make sure you were good with the plan.
Okay.
So
I didn't see that email.
Yeah, I had just sent it to you maybe 30, 45 minutes before we started this, because I was waiting to hear back and make sure it was that he liked the idea of having you guys, that's what I see your role as being to some degree is when there are accessibility issues, run them through you guys. Eventually you need to be
yes.
experts on all this stuff.
Yes, because I checked my email prior to this meeting and I didn't see anything from you because I was waiting for you to check in. And I'm going, geez, I'm waiting for Mike and I don't see him. I didn't see any emails.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Can you bring us up to speed on that then?
Okay, so make sure I have the right pictures here. This is just the email that, can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just the email I sent him. So so they've got a ballot box that they've ordered for outside ballot collection for the primaries. And, of
Okay.
course, every other election after that. So we were looking at different areas to put it, where originally it was suggested to place it next to the payment box in the driveway, which is primarily used for vehicles dropping things off. One, it kind of goes the wrong direction for people, but it's outside of the reach ranges and an accessible route for anybody that's on foot. So what Kevin Duffy and I and Faye had talked about was actually this, not really the best picture. Because
We're not seeing your pictures. We're seeing this, the disability study thing that you did still.
Oh, okay. Hang on a second. Let me make sure I've got the right screen shared. New share. Yes, you're right. You seeing it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the accessible spaces. Here would be Worcester Street right here. So what we talked about was pouring a slab right there and putting it against the building.
Okay.
And the reason we decided that made the most sense is, one, they can only have one box. They don't have the manpower to keep up with multiple. And there's just not another good spot on the site to put it. The issue, one of the issues you have here is every route that leads to it is in one way, shape, or form non-compliant with the slope guidelines. So if you're coming off Worcester Street and trying to get to this box, you're trucking up almost a 10-degree or a 10% slope to get there. But it doesn't sound like that's a heavily, people travel that a lot on foot, but there's not a whole lot of wheelchair traffic that comes off of that road. The spaces here, both the parking spaces, are slightly non-compliant, and there's some cross slope issues on this little stretch of the, let's make this bigger. Oh, I can't. There's some cross slope issues, but basically this was the best spot we could find.
Okay, that's the handicap spot, right?
Yeah. Can I make a comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
If a handicapped person parks in that first spot, the curbing is much too high
Yep.
for a handicapped person to get up there. So they've got to walk halfway down to get to the curb cut. And
Yes.
if their car is parked the way it should be, there's going to be no room. They're going to have to walk around the back. And then, through the, it's not safe.
Well, the location. All right. So there's two issues there. One is you have two spaces that share an access aisle right there. The dimensions of the spaces and the location of the curb ramp and the accessible route is actually okay by standard. Is it the best design? No. So quite frankly, there's not much you can do about it there. Now, upside is you do have another space, right on the other side that has a good ingress point to that curb cut and that ramp right there. But generally speaking, the sidewalks at Town Hall are a mess. There's cross slope issues there. You've got that railing over by door number 1 that kind of protrudes right into the landing off that other accessible space that's not accessible. So, eventually you're going to have to do a pretty big project at Town Hall to deal with all of the site elements outside that building. When that's going to be, that's really up to you guys, but it's got enough issues that it kind of warrants like almost a complete redesign of the way that the walkways interact with the building, and in particular with the road. Because from my perspective, that access from the right of way for people that are pedestrians it's bad. And that's, to me, the single biggest issue you have at that site. So none of that does much for the immediate issue of needing to put the drop box in, but we looked at everything on the site and that was the best we could come up with. So I wanted to make sure that you guys agreed or see if you had any alternative ideas.
Yeah, it can't go on near the other door because there's just no room over there.
Yep. Everywhere else it's in a bad spot. The upside that we get here is we've got a deep enough area between the building that you've got a full, if somebody is in a wheelchair, a mobility device or a scooter or something, they've got actually a pretty good maneuvering space right there. Part of the maneuvering space would be on the existing sidewalk, which has a bad cross slope, but it's not awful.
Right.
So this is one of those, it's a cheap, easy fix. It's, half a yard of concrete. And it's an improvement. But it may be ripping it out in a few years if they ever redo the sidewalks. So
Plus it's well lit too, so.
it's well lit. There's a security camera right there.
You can see it.
Yeah.
It had good access. The other thing that I think Kevin's going to be able to do while he does this, that we advised, is go ahead and deal with some of the minor maintenance issues, the gaps in the sidewalks right there, and try to get those filled. Deal with some of the cracks. And there's, we can fix the
They could do
signs at that time too.
the half inch between that and the other to meet the slope requirement of the change of surface between the two levels.
Yeah, there's a bunch of, they need to get a grinder out there and just knock down some of the edges. And then on some of the gaps between the slabs where it's settled, they've exceeded that half-inch gap. And so they can fill that. They make sealants that are made for sidewalks that can mitigate that change in level. But if they've got a crew out there, Kevin thinks they can go out and kind of knock out a bunch of these little things at the same time. And I kind of, that's what this email was just giving them a list of, hey, if you're going to be out there, let's deal with this drop box and maybe move it over by where the new ballot box is going to be. Let's deal with some of the other stuff.
Right.
And they were, they thought that was a good idea, but they did want me to run it by you in your advisory capacity and make sure you were in agreement.
Yeah, that seems like it's a good idea there.
It does.
Because over by the other one, it's not.
Yeah, there's not a perfect spot, but this is as good, maximum extent feasible is what we're shooting for.
Yeah.
So that's all I have on that. If you want to move on to whatever your next piece is, I'll pass on to Jim that you were good with that. And then I'll stick around until you're done with me.
Okay, the other issues that I wanted to talk about, we had some questions on, well, we had discussed the ADA coordinator, that if it was possible to discuss with the board, with the commission, that he shows us some of the standards and specifications that the steps are being followed during each construction phase of Pride Park. That maybe he gives us reports in writing. To show us that the steps are being done properly. Do you think that that would be a good idea for us to have on file?
I think it depends how you have the. I think it depends what's in his job description for this, and then what the town administrator and the select board ultimately want to see from that. I don't know that you have the, well, I know that you don't have the ability to get that from him. So really, I think that's a question for Pat and for the select board. You know, ultimately, somebody has to be responsible for that project turning out right, and being held accountable if for some reason it's not. You know, my recommendation would always be when you're building something for the town, you're inspecting that thing every single time, at every single opportunity, not because you can't well, if you had a contractor doing it and you could make that contractor rip it out and redo it when he didn't do it to plan, that's one thing. But when you're doing it in-house, you've got nobody you can hold accountable for except your own organization. I don't know that I would want to take the risk of being fully responsible for having that entire thing built and then not being in compliance because you didn't shoot grades a couple times in the middle just to make sure. But that's really, that's kind of outside of anything I can weigh in on, is whether that's something that the ADA coordinator should be doing.
Okay,
A building inspector should be doing that, or at least should be responsible for doing the inspection at the end, of whether or not some element of a site was built to code.
okay.
Who is currently the ADA coordinator, Kim?
I would believe that would be the building inspector, wouldn't it, Pat?
It is.
Yeah,
See, I think that's a conflict of interest.
I don't know that, I mean, this committee, it's not our, I don't think it's under the Disability Commission's purview to say, to get reports that a project that's being done by the town is being done to ADA standards. The building inspector and the companies that we hire had damn well better be doing it to ADA standards when that was the whole purpose of doing this project to begin with. Where I think we're more of a, okay, this is the high level things that need to be done, and this is what we're recommending. We're an advisory committee, as to then turn around and say we're gonna have any purview over, was this project that was done in compliance with ADA standards. We have full-time town employees that are in charge of that need to make sure that happens. I mean, what?
but we make sure that we don't get sued.
Well, just to make sure if we're doing a project, especially, one, the nature of Pride Park, which is specifically being done to bring us into compliance.
Yeah,
It's not, I don't think they need to then report back to us on a however, frequent basis to say, yes, we're doing things within compliance. I
right.
think we're more of, hey, these are the issues that we have. This is our 113-page Word document that we paid for to say, let's get this done.
Right.
And monitor that and say, yes, we have the plan, and yes, we're moving forward with the plan. But the actual boots on the ground implementing of the plan, that's not, I don't believe that's falls under us. Mike,
Okay.
in other towns.
I mean, I think ultimately it's like you said, it's whatever the executive authority of a town is, that's who's ultimately accountable for this. However, their organizational structure is to ensure something gets done right from a project standpoint. That's the building inspector, that's the DPW who's doing the work. I don't think this commission is really set up to do that work. I think a question though that should be asked really by the select board is, are we 100% sure this is going to be built to standard, and what steps are we taking to get there? I don't think that's a question for the Disability Commission to ask. I think that's a question for, the select board and the town administrator to ask.
And that's why there is a select board rep on the ADA Pride Park project. It was Mike. He's no longer on the board, so now it's me. So that's one of the hats I'm wearing there is as a disability committee member, but all a commission member, but also like you just said, as a select board member. I mean, if you go back to when we were first doing this, I think Mike, you might have been at the Zoom meeting we were talking about. One person said, yes, this plan is within compliance. Another person at the meeting said, no, this plan is not within compliance. And I just said, stop. We're not moving forward. We're not having this discussion anymore. I'm getting two experts giving me two different opinions. We're not at the stage where we can move forward with this plan. We have to take a step back, and that happened. So, I mean, the select board is certainly very mindful of this project in particular. Now, when the police station was built, and the senior center was built, I can tell you that the facilities implementation committee and the select board just assumed that everything was being built to code, and we I think we're now coming to realize that that's not something that engineers and architects really do unless you push them to do it. I mean,
they do it. It's typically, building inspectors historically, and this has been the shift in the last 5 to 10 years, the focus is on life safety and the focus is on structural issues and mechanical issues. You don't find building inspectors anywhere that are whipping out a tape measure and checking the height of a toilet lid, and until they go through a process like this. So honestly, I think that the police station and the senior center were great, considering there wasn't somebody out there every single day checking absolutely everything, which is what you see in a town that got sued. Once they got bit once or twice, that's when the building inspectors kind of get into that. Oh my gosh, we got to, on our own buildings, we're measuring absolutely everything. But you're right, it wasn't the focus back then that it is now.
Well, we have a Pride Park ADA upground committee that I wasn't aware of. And I had Masha ask for the minutes so that we could review them for this meeting. But I guess they had multiple agendas, and there was only one set of minutes that we weren't able to.
Right, I
Yes.
only have the minutes from the first meeting on April 20th, 2021.
This is on that
I don't-
committee as well.
You're
I
on
don't-
that?
No, he's not.
Oh,
There was a meeting on August 10th, 2021. There was a meeting on 4/13/2021, 4/21/2021, and May 6th, 2021. And there's no meeting minutes of any of those. And I'm told that by the town clerk that she doesn't know if they've met because there's nothing for an agenda after last August. So it's been a year since they've met. So we don't know if there's anything, pending for minutes to be approved or not.
yeah, so that's kind of odd.
That committee has definitely met since last August, because they put a CPC application in to try to get at the Maytown meeting in April of this year. So and I spoke with Jim Pedoni on that, and so that was the committee had met. So
That committee never had an agenda for that meeting, Pat, that was posted.
Like I said, I'm brand new to that committee. I haven't been to any meetings. I just got appointed to it within the past couple of weeks.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't sat down with them. I don't know I can't speak to anything that's happened in the past, but all I can tell you is that an application was submitted that was at the behest of that committee and
Okay,
submitted in April. So they had a meeting. I'm not saying that they followed the rules, but I know they have met.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to the DPW director about what they're doing, and they said that they were just removing the equipment and putting the equipment back down. So whether that means that they're doing the underlayment or whether the engineers are doing the underlayment, I spoke to Mike Edwards about that. Hopefully the engineers are doing the underlayment. Right, Mike? So that they would be doing the slope
My
requirements?
recollection was, at least when the original plans were approved and the original budget established prior to going to town meeting, that the DPW was going to perform the excavation, the removal and relocation of the existing equipment, the base, which was basically just the gravel, the crush run. And I don't know if it was AB or what it was. And then the vendor was going to be doing the fabric, the next layer. I think there's a layer of sand or a layer of stone dust, and then possibly another layer of fabric, and then ultimately the rubberized surface, as well as installing all of the new equipment and the retrofit pieces that went on the old equipment to make it accessible. I don't know if that's, I couldn't say if that's still the plan. That was kind of the last time I was associated with.
I mean,
Yeah,
these
when
are-
we talked to, I talked to the US Access Board, and I took a class in the playground accessible play areas, and they talked about the ASTMF standards for the underlayment. And they talked about having the use zone impact attenuation surface materials within the play equipment and the immediately surrounding and under in the different impact zones in the wheelchair work test, lab testing and straight propulsion and turning zones and stuff. And they talked about the certificates and things. And they said that towns usually have the certificates and they should have those on file in case somebody gets hurt. You have those to protect the town from getting sued. Is that the case in most cities and towns, or is that something that they just say in class that you would normally have these on file, or is that just to protect themselves? And this class is based on 2010 standards.
I think ultimately, yeah, I mean, the 2010 standards covered all your, they added that chapter 10, which had all the playground areas. The ASTMF standards are several standards around
Right.
play equipment, and typically they're followed by the manufacturers also. The materials they use when they manufacture the equipment, and the materials they use when they install the base and the rubberized base. But again, I think this is, you have a design that's been stamped by an engineer.
Right.
You have a playground vendor that is selling all of the equipment and the surface and is certifying all of this equipment. Ultimately, you have a series of, documentation along the way that provides you some level of guarantee that it's going to be done correctly and it's going to meet standards. I don't pretend to know what the town typically keeps in terms of documentation on projects, but I would assume at the very least it is those things.
I mean, Kim, these are all good questions, but I don't think that this is something that this commission should be discussing. It's not within our purview how that gets built. And I mean, that's not something we're gonna do. We have.
Yes, Pat, but the Disabilities Commission is part of the United States Access Board. We are part of the Access Board, and this is part of our under our description.
I understand where you're coming from, but we've got full-time town employees that are working on this project. We've got an entire committee dedicated to just this project. And
Yeah,
we need to, as a disability commission, we need to focus on the big overall for the town, what needs to be addressed. Once the issues start getting addressed, okay, they're being addressed. We have to take it on faith that when we're addressing an issue that is an ADA issue, that it's going to be properly addressed. Otherwise, we will get nothing done. We
right.
cannot go down into the weeds and say, oh, is the Pride Park project being done correctly? We
Right,
just have to, as a commission, say the Pride Park project is being done. What's the next thing on our list? Let's prioritize. What do we think should be done next?
right.
That's how
Oh, I know, but this is one of the things that the US Access Board directly asked me with this course, because we were developed specifically for Pride Park. And this is a follow-up on that. So this is why I'm asking him.
This commission was not developed for Pride Park. This commission, Pride Park is happening. This commission is completely separate from this was developed as a result of what is happening at Pride Park. We were not developed for Pride Park or to be involved in Pride Park. This commission was developed by a vote of the town to look at the overall accessibility issues in the town. And we're not, I don't think that our charge is to go down into each project and try to figure out if they're doing it right or wrong. Yeah, I mean, we're a volunteer board.
I agree. I think what Pat's trying to say is that we're not going to supervise a project. That is, we're not going to show up with tape measures to see if everything is in compliance. That's out of our purview. We're an advisory board. We're not the building inspector.
Right, okay. Okay. All right, I stand corrected. They just want to make sure that we don't go down the road and get end up going to court, which they'll make us end up tearing it apart if we're at fault. Is that right, Mike?
I think it depends on the circumstances, but
Even if that were to happen, that's not on us, and it's
Right.
not something we should be concerned with.
Okay. All right. I stand corrected. I'm new at this, so if I go out of bounds again, I thank my commission for correcting me.
I'm concerned about the fact that there's no minutes to this other meeting, this other committee, and that they have had meetings and there's no agenda for them. So I'll check with the town clerk tomorrow.
So Pat, do you think that you can get the CIB Excel?
I already sent that email to both Mike and Ray when we were talking about it. So that email's already been sent. Ray's pretty responsive. I would be surprised if Mike doesn't have it by tomorrow.
Okay. So we can follow up on that. I will send this Word document to everybody and we can take a look at that and we can set our next meeting. Now, I'm going to be gone until October, beginning of October. So we need to set up our date for
Public hearing.
Yeah.
So I think, Kim, I understand you're not going to be here, but I don't think we can wait till October to have another meeting. We got to
I
review.
know,
the
I
document.
know. So when do you guys want to meet?
Sometime in about a month from now?
Okay, somebody have a calendar?
I do. Do you want it on a Tuesday?
Yeah.
We've got September 13th, September 20th.
Which one?
The 20th, oh, that, we're looking at September. Hold on. Either one is fine by me.
You had
Anybody
September
Make it the
20th at
20th.
6? Okay,
20th?
The 20th.
at 6?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you, Mike, for doing our meeting again. And I'm sorry for going on and on, and I apologize.
No, perfectly okay. It was nice seeing everybody again. I'm just glad to be getting this wrapped up here.
Yeah.
I apologize to Pat and Ron for rambling.
Don't worry about it.
Okay,
So just
So,
just to quickly recap, if I might, the meeting on the 20th would be primarily the first review of the document we're going to be receiving. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the primary purpose of it. And then do we want to plan now a meeting for the public hearing at the beginning of October, or wait till you get back, Kim?
actually, if we can set, if Marcia wants to post an agenda for the public hearing, we can set the public hearing for the beginning of October, and we can set the meeting date, and we can have it when I get back.
All right. When are you getting back?
I should be getting back by the 1st or 2nd.
Okay. So how about the 4th for a public hearing?
Okay,
Is that plenty enough time?
yeah, it should be. And if it's not,
Can I
I'll
ask, what date did you have for the review with me? So I can go ahead and put that on my calendar,
September 20th?
September 20th. At
And Mike-
6 o'clock, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
Mike, do you want us to set individually to send you our comments before that?
I'm fine with whatever you guys are able to do under your public meeting rules.
So
So
we
if you want to send me individual comments, if you want to have a call, I have no problem at all.
we can all communicate with you and say, hey, on page 13, I don't like this, blah, 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 but I can't, call Ron and Kim
Sure.
and then say, this is the
Right.
thought. So generally, when we're reviewing documents like this, what ends up happening is everybody does an independent review. We send our comments to you and kind of.
I like that. I think, from my perspective, the way that I'm going to continue to work and get all the rest of the pieces put in there as we go. So you guys feel free to just put all your stuff in an email, mark up the document, send it back, and I can address all of your comments in the next version, which if we're not talking till the 20th, I should be able to have, if we want to set a time to get all your comments back, I can probably have you a fully completed draft by the 20th with everything plus your comments addressed. And then the only thing to review is whether or not any of your comments are in, disagreement with somebody else's comments.
When do you need that? You tell us, I think, what the deadline.
I mean, if you can get me your review, I'll have all of the elements completed in this report and everything back to you. I'm leaving town tomorrow until Monday, but I should be able to get everything to you guys by, the remaining piece of the report. If my people get everything back to me by like the 23rd or 24th of this month, if you can get me all of your comments by, gosh, I don't know, we say the 4th, well, when do you need to post it by, Kim?
48 hours before the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so it would get posted on the 16th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if I can get all the comments by like the 13th, the 12th or 13th, that should be enough. So I can take,
Okay.
I mean,
We don't need to post the we just need to post the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
We can have a
Oh.
final version of it. You could finish it at 5:50 the night of the meeting and.
Yeah, get them to me. Why don't we say by September 16th?
okay.
That give you, I mean, that doesn't seem like a lot of time for you to address our comments.
Uh,
I mean,
okay, let's say the 14th. I want to give you as much time as you need.
If you're, I was thinking more towards the beginning of September, that gives, I mean, well, let me ask you this, what between now and the 23rd, 24th, are there going to be really any substantive changes to it that we would need to comment on, or is it just?
Well, the only thing that's still going to be going in there are the physical facility audits, which, I mean, there's not going to be much to comment on. They are what they are.
So if you're comfortable with the 14th, that's fine, but I was thinking more towards the,
Well, let's say the 2nd.
that's what I was thinking.
Okay,
I mean, whenever I'll get it done. So, you know, I'll give you guys as much time as you need, but if you think the 2nd works great, that works good for me.
Okay, can I ask a question? The public hearing, we're going to be having it at the town hall, am I right?
yes.
Okay, and what time?
Do you want to do it?
6:30?
Yeah, that sounds good.
What day are we looking at?
October 4th?
October 4th. And I'll post that. And I'll get a room reserved.
And that's 14 days before town meeting?
Yeah. Now, Kim, when are you leaving?
I'm leaving the 17th. Next week.
Okay, so I'll be posting the next meeting.
October 4th is not it's 14 calendar days before town meeting. Is that what we need, or do we need
Yes.
14 business days? It's
14 calendar days.
so then it is the 14th day prior. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, it's the 14th day prior to town meeting. That's the last day that we can have it. So if we end up having to continue that public hearing, we could have an issue. That being said, how many people are going to come out for the Disability Commission bylaws?
I don't think it's gonna be a problem, Pat.
Neither do I.
Okay. All right, so on the 20th for September, it will be a Zoom meeting because Mike, you'll be here, right?
Yes,
I mean, I'm just down the road from you guys, so I can do Zoom or in person. I don't care. Whatever you want to do.
Town hall is set up to do Zoom, to do hybrid meetings if we wanted to do both as well,
what's a hybrid meeting?
where we have in person with the Zoom participation. So
Oh,
we can, if there is an in-person meeting, we can have a Zoom where I'm not in town, but I can still go to the meeting. That's been extended until March of 2023. And I would be shocked if it wasn't made permanent.
oh,
Okay, so do you want to have that one at the town hall then? And then we can sit down and go over the whole thing with Mike?
Yeah.
I will, if I have good reception from out in the mountains.
Why not? You could
I
you
might
could
be
sign
able
on.
to- I might be able to sign in.
Exactly.
So set it up with Faye.
I
on the
will.
20th
I
for
will.
that.
I will. Is that all right with you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm in Shrewsbury, so I'm just a hop, skip,
Oh.
and a jump. So
Oh, okay.
Marcia,
right.
you're gonna set that up. Let Faye know that you don't have to have the agenda done. Just let Faye know that we're gonna want to do a hybrid meeting so you can reserve the Zoom in the room.
I will. I'll do that tomorrow.
Perfect.
Hybrid meeting. All right, now, that means, Mike, if you can forward your final thing to me, then I can go to the town hall and make copies of it, and everybody can have it that night. Or I can
Okay.
make sure it's sent to them.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay.
Kim, can you forward me
Yep.
Marcia's email so I have it?
Yep.
I'm about to send you the draft. It's a
Yep.
large file, so if, just make sure you get it and reply back. If not,
Yep.
I'll figure out how to get it to you. I maybe set up
Okay.
an FTP or something.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, just let me know. It may take a little bit to get through wherever it goes, but if you don't get it in the next 30 minutes or so, let me know and I'll resend it.
Okay.
You'll be getting my email anyways when I send you
Oh, perfect.
responses.
Okay.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. Sounds very good. Okay.
All
All
We'll
right.
right.
set on dates then.
All right. So we all set?
I
Yep.
think so.
Okay. Do I motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Adjourned at
Seconded.
7:56. Thank you, everybody.